Yes! What is up, everybody, and welcome to another exciting installment of the U.S. Men's National Team Hour on the Qué Golazo podcast. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Heath Pierce, and we have Europe's top 5 leagues have become a rich breeding ground for U.S. Men's National Team talent. We're going to talk about that, of course. We're going to maybe turn on a Champions League game in the future. There's a good chance an American will be playing. That's what we've seen over the group stages. That's been very exciting. And while that is undoubtedly a good thing, as I've just mentioned, it shouldn't come at the expense of us that are maybe overlooking the U.S. Men's National Team players that are plying their trade on this side of the pond, playing in MLS domestically, maybe even in the USL. So with the 2021 MLS season done and dusted, congratulations to NYCFC again. Today we want to shine some light on our domestic league brethren. The U.S. Men's National Team Hour begins right now. All right, everybody, before we get into the conversation, before I introduce Heath Pierce, I have to say a few things. Make sure to check out our full Champions League Match Day 6 preview. That's not true. Our group stage preview. No, that's not even true. Our knockout round preview. That's available later today, wherever you get your podcasts. And for those of you who are more visually inclined, make sure you check it out on our YouTube channel, Qué Golazo YouTube channel. It's also free, and that is very cool. If you're watching live on YouTube, I can't emphasize this enough. Smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave us a comment. Tell us where you're from and who you support. That's always a good way to get introduced to the community. We appreciate you. And of course, we want to get your comments. So make sure you share your thoughts in the comments section. Now, some of you are listening to this in podcast form, like I already mentioned. That is awesome. You know what else is awesome? You subscribing to the Qué Golazo podcast and leaving us a 5-star review. We would forever be your BFFs. I think that's the way that it goes. And speaking of BFFs, let's bring in Heath Pierce, a former U.S. Men's National Team player, just like myself. Heath, great to see you as always. How are you doing, my friend?
I was great. This was a great introduction, Jimmy. And then Danny came in with the hammer saying Heath Pierce needs no introduction. So that was just exactly what I needed. I was feeling a little shy. Where do I fit in? Where do I get going? And here we are, Dan Kane giving me some love. So I'm doing well, Jimmy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack, a lot to talk about, both domestically, Europe-wise, globally. But let's talk about MLS. Big win by NYCFC. I thought they were the better team over the 120 minutes and obviously in penalties against the Portland Timbers. I think sometimes the pressure of hosting the final can be a little bit too much. There's a lot of expectation there. And I don't know if that was the sole reason that did the Timbers in, but I don't know if it necessarily helps. But let's talk about the winners. Let's talk about Sean Johnson, MLS Cup MVP, third-string goalkeeper for the U.S. Men's National Team behind Matt Turner and Zach Steffen. And then, of course, James Sands running things in the middle of midfield for NYCFC or any position, frankly, that they need him to play and doing it well. Do you think that those two winning MLS Cup helps them in any way in terms of getting more time for the U.S. Men's National Team?
When I look at something like that, right, and you go back to people that were you go back to players that were third string in World Cup, right? Nick Rimando being one of them. You know what he was good at? Stopping penalties. You know what he was good at? Coming in and being able to step up and rise to the occasion. Now, I've been critical of the third string option of Sean Johnson, not because of his capabilities, but because of the fact that it just feels like when you get into the third string, you start to look at what else is there out there? What's the opportunity for a third string player to gain experience, to go to a World Cup, to be sort of building that pipeline of who's the next player? Obviously, goalkeepers have a different lifespan than your average field player does. But when I see a player like that, I go, wow, you could see what they see in him, because we don't get to see him much at the national team level, right? We've seen him at times, and he's been around in the national team for a decade now, but he's never become that number one. When he had opportunities, you know, if you go back to what we have now for Zach Steffen, Sean Johnson was in the national team far before Zach Steffen was, I believe. And now you're looking at, I'm blanking on his name, Matt Turner. I always call him Head Turner because that's his social media name, and I get confused. But you're looking at them that have come in and taken those spots away from Sean Johnson, who was part of even my national team era going back 10 years ago, or the end of my national team era 10 years ago, when it was him and it was what's his name at DC United. I'm blanking now because I got a little bit of that afternoon sort of cloudiness. But I think it's a huge thing to see the capabilities that he has, and it reminds us. Sometimes we get very critical of a player that we don't get to see play that often, unless you're an NYCFC fan. You don't get to see him play much on the national team. That his abilities, and I think that's great. Now, to switch over one, unless you want to stick on that, because actually, let's stick on that. I want your take on that as well in terms of forming a number 3 for national team.
Well, and I think Dan Hurricane Kane makes a good point. Maybe Sean Johnson is our penalty kick specialist. Maybe we bring him in to do that. I feel like Matt Turner's already proven to be pretty good at penalties. I would be hard pressed to think that Zach Steffen is anything different. These guys are all world class in their own ways. And Sean Johnson, though, and I want this, I'm going to kind of segue this thought into.
Wait, didn't he not save any penalties in the cup when they went out recently in England?
Maybe. I was trying to give Zach Steffen a bone. I was throwing him a bone there.
I'm pretty sure he didn't save any when they went out recently. I could be completely wrong. Maybe he saved all of them and they stayed in, but I think they went out of one of the cups and he didn't save any of the penalties.
You know what? That happens to David De Gea too. And look at that guy's in fine form right now. So I think there is room for having a player that could be that person on your team. But in terms of the third goalkeeper, I think it has to be somebody who's kind of good in the locker room, understands their role, doesn't pout, that type of stuff. Not to say I think Sean Johnson can play that role, and he's been doing it well up until this point. But to your point earlier, do you just bring in a younger option to give them the experience that I think is necessary at that level so they can see what they need to do to get to that point? I don't know.
David Ochoa? Could have been David Ochoa.
Could have been
if he had chosen. Will never be now.
I don't know. I'll say that I don't know if David Ochoa would be a good number 3. He seems
but I'm saying he could have.
He could have been, but
I think he likes to be in the limelight. Yeah, I don't know if he'd be comfortable. I think I think he's the kind of guy that's like me or nobody, which I respect in terms of a competitor, right? You want that, and you have those guys in every single locker room, no matter what, that don't necessarily have and I'm not saying this is him, but you have guys that don't actually always see the bigger picture or have a holistic view of what they are, and you need those kinds of guys that are very self-driven, and I don't want to say self-interested with regard to him, but those guys exist on every team. But Slonina is one that I'm thinking about, right? When I look at Sean Johnson and Gabriel Slonina, 17 years old, fantastic player, has a huge upside. This is the same situation that we saw when Sean Johnson came in. Let's not forget that Sean Johnson was a late draft pick, by the way, and shocked people with how late he went in becoming a draft pick. I think as one of the only GA players that went as late as he did. But he's still been around for a decade now, right? It's not like I don't think Sean Johnson is competing for the number 1 or 2 spot, I guess is what I'm saying. So how do you judge the third spot, right? And he showed in MLS Cup how you should or could judge the third spot, which is a guy, no matter what, is ready to game and step up if called upon. Likely isn't, but the other side of the coin is like, is there somebody that could step up? I'm not sure if Gabriel Slonina could step into the national team game right now if you had to call upon him. And you don't want to bring a player that isn't ready if called upon to do that.
Yeah, good thoughts here too. Just to get into the fun facts, Jason makes a good point. Sean Johnson saved 5 penalties and 3 penalty shootouts this season. 2 against Pumas. He did 1 against the Revs and 2 against the Timbers. Also, in that 1 against the Revs, Matt Turner did not save any penalties against NYCFC. And Zach Steffen did not save any penalties against West Ham. That's the team that you were looking for in the League Cup. So, yes, a lot to unpack there. And I do think that there's some value. Now, the point that I want to really get into a little bit, because I find this to be very interesting because I lived it myself, and I'm curious about your thoughts and how this pertains to the players that we're discussing. Sean Johnson already kind of in the pool.
Yeah.
James Sands on the peripheral really, I think, has fallen out in some ways. And when I was trying to break into the team, I was thinking to myself, how the hell am I going to get called into the national team? And the only way that I could really find a solution was I have to be a part of the best defense in the league. And I locked down. We have to lead the league in shutouts. Mm-hmm. We have to lead the goals against. We have to not give up that many shots. Because I mean, if it's the goalkeeper that's standing on his head, he'll probably get called in and not me. We have to own this space and then I have to be somewhat of the leader of that back four, the leader of that defense for me to actually get a look. And not only that, not only the stats, but you have to back it up with trophies. You got to win stuff. And that was for me the only way that I was going to get Bruce Arena to pay attention to me at all. And I was so bummed because we had the best defense in 2004 at MLS. Mm-hmm. We won the Open Cup and we lost in the goddamn final. And I thought, that's it. I didn't do it. I didn't win the double. I didn't win MLS Defender of the Year. They gave it to Robin Fraser. I was second. I was so close. And then thankfully, Danny Califf went to go over to Europe to try to apply his trade in the January transfer window. That opened up a spot for me to come in, and I made the most of it. But that was like the only tangible way. So to speak about this question, if I'm James Sands, like, what else do I have to do? I'm doing it. I can only play the games that are in front of me. I can only play on the team that I'm on. And I'm now a champion, and I feel like I was a valuable part of that experience. Same with Sean Johnson. Do you feel like that's going to change Gregg's mind in any way? Because there is something about that intangible quality of knowing how to win games and tough games as well.
Yeah, I think there's a few things in that, Jimmy. Obviously, it's not with the national team, it's not what you do, it's when you do it, right? Go back a year before that, Jimmy. If you got called in, you've now got a whole year to set that standard, right? Or you have to hold that standard, or 2 years even, for you to, how much of that, I guess, on your take, before I get to the other points, do you think the timing of you making the World Cup squad was your opportunity and you finally got it? Or was it the timing that you got a chance to get called in? You got a chance, like the window opened for you, both with an opening for a roster spot, as well as the timing leading up into a World Cup. I mean, how much of that do you think was timing for you?
The timing is important for me to kind of come, I don't know, of age, or for the clouds to open up with my rainy, sad cloud rain over me, thunderstorm or whatever. To have that happen a year and a half before a World Cup, I think was important for me to kind of really put my stamp on things. And then I knew I had to do it quickly. I had 3 weeks in that January camp to win over Bruce Arena and Glenn Meyernick and the whole coaching staff.
So that was really January 2005 before the summer 2006 World Cup. So you had 18 months.
18 months. Yeah. But I think what also benefited me was that we're going to start World Cup qualifying, but the Gold Cup over the summer. So I was going to, if I could make that team and prove to the coaching staff that I was somebody you could trust over a tournament, over 30 days. Yeah. And James Sands has had that opportunity to bring him back into the equation. And he was part of the Gold Cup winning team.
But were you not impressed with him in the Gold Cup? I
was until I feel like Miles Robinson actually is the one that took bigger steps. And maybe I'm having recency bias with regard to Miles and him scoring in the final.
What about James Sands as a midfielder instead of
I like James Sands as a midfielder. When he went down he just happened to be part of that unfortunate starting team against Panama that we lost.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that's boding well. Like when he got that opportunity, he didn't necessarily make the most of it. Maybe by no fault of his own, just that he was surrounded by a lineup that wasn't suited for
tough,
success.
Man.
I know it is.
But then I look at the club's success and I think there has to be some warrant. Again, I always go back to the first time I had been following the story of Conrad de la Fuente for a while, right? But there wasn't much to see him other than a few clips here and there, like highlight reel type things, because he was playing at Barcelona B. Then they brought him in and I was like, oh, not impressed. This guy's not very good. I don't say not very good, but he's not ready. He was 18. He called in for the first time. He just looked off the pace of the international game. Fast forward a few months later, they bring him back in. And I was like, oh, this guy's really good. He's got a lot of potential here. But at least it went from being like not at the international level to me to being at the international level, but still potential, right? They were still like, he hadn't made it, but I actually saw like, okay, this is what people are seeing at Barcelona B. This is what they're seeing now at Marseille. And I think about the same context of James Sands. Is he a player that now, hey, he's had a moment to step away and he could step back in and be a role in the national team? I also think that they technically could have been or were playing him out of position with the national team for a long time, that I want to look at him at the 6. And I only say that, Jimmy, and I don't want to go too deep into this right now, or we can, is because I worry about our 6. I worry about the depth of our 6 spot. We know we have Tyler Adams. We've talked about it at length. We talk about it every single Monday of, if not Tyler Adams, then who? Or if Tyler Adams plus somebody in a double pivot, who else could that be? And I don't think there's an option right now. I don't think Kellen Acosta replaces Tyler Adams. I think he can do the job, but he doesn't replace Tyler Adams. And I think if you do a double pivot, I don't like the way that they necessarily vibe together in terms of their style of play and what you can do offensively and defensively. So when I look at it, James Sands, who's muy tranquilo on the ball, he's technical, he seems to have the answers. He was just, what I liked about him was that calm, right? We've seen that with Yunus Musa now, that calm of just this guy that's like not really fazed by things. Having said that, he had a couple of bad turnovers in that game where he started with the national team, where he was maybe a little too calm. So, I mean, as the player that he is, do you not see a spot for him now in the national team with regard to MLS Cup and just sort of a chance to take a step away and then come back?
Yeah, I think that he's going to gain confidence from how he performed and how he helped the team win their first trophy. It's a bit of a bummer that he didn't get called in for this one. I know it'd been kind of back to back, going to MLS Cup, winning that, stepping right into the national team.
Would you think he would have if they were out of the playoffs? I mean, Sean for sure, but like
I think yes. If James Sands wasn't called into this friendly and they were out of the playoffs, I think that would have been the end of James Sands' career, at least in this particular cycle.
Sebastian
right now,
that wasn't.
That's true. That's true. I feel like that's okay for me. That's okay because we know what Sebastian can bring to the team. He does need,
and he's gone through a lot this season on a personal level.
He has
a lot of things to go through. That perhaps it was a chance for him to just
and I'm sure
more time with family and all that.
Yeah, and I don't think you need him in this particular.
Or he's out of the national team, Jimmy.
Potentially, but I don't think you need him in this particular game. Like you don't need to see any more of Sebastian Lletget in this particular game. With regard to the 6, I agree with you that we don't have anybody that can cover the type of ground that that Tyler Adams can. You have Kellen Acosta, who can do the job, but can't do it as well as Tyler Adams. You have Jackson Ewell, who is in this camp against Bosnia and Herzegovina this upcoming weekend, December 18th. You have Johnny Cordoso, who was born in New Jersey, but moved to Brazil after 3 months, and he's playing for Internacional. And he is a spot starter for them. He's only started 11 games out of the 38. He's 20 years old. He's been with our U23s. He was part of the Olympic qualifying. I like parts of his game. I want to see more. So in this particular game, and we can, well, I guess we're going to get into the game itself a little bit later. But this is an opportunity to see more players, you know, and to really test them out. And I'm kind of curious as to, do you think, let's just kind of keep it on the MLS tip and we'll get into the Bosnia game as we preview that moving forward. But do you think the MLS players are going to have that rare benefit of, because of a Winter World Cup, they're going to be a little bit more ready to go and a little bit more sharp, as opposed to the other players who, and I don't know if you've seen the schedule or not, for let's say Mo Salah, let's say Egypt makes the World Cup. They'll have Champions League like the week before. There's no real preseason World Cup camp, and they just go right into playing. They might have a week, and then
is that what the schedule is?
Yeah,
the week.
Yeah. It's
wow.
I think for me, what I saw, I thought it was less than a week, but I assume there's going to be at least a week. Now, I don't know if Liverpool will just release those players. I assume maybe they'll be like 2 weeks, so they got to release their players for the World Cup. But if they didn't, I'm sure they're probably. I haven't seen any of that. But it's possible that you could run up and play like a Champions League game or a game on the weekend, and then you head to Qatar and you're playing that following weekend for your first match in the group. I mean, it's just wild.
I think that benefits the other schedules then more than MLS player, only because of the fact that their rest time is now. Those players will have some rest time in the summertime, and then they'll go into a season fresher. Yeah. So you're at a halfway point in terms of your fatigue, in terms of just the buildup of miles. And don't get me wrong, like these guys are all playing 70 games a year now. Like it's crazy the workload that these players have, and to step straight into a World Cup, I think you're at peak match fitness at that point. Coming out of the end of the season.
That's fair.
Now imagine if when does and I'm thinking about the MLS season next year. It starts the last week of February or somewhere around there.
I'll get it. You keep talking. I'll find it.
And it'll run into likely MLS Cup finishing right before the start of the World Cup. But what if you're a player whose team doesn't make the playoffs next year? Or, what's the window of time? And again, I'm speculating on that because I don't have it in front of me.
If I'm Gregg Berhalter, I'm starting the camp as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah.
As soon as guys fall out, if I'm going to take them and they're in the team. Yeah, they're coming into a camp and we're going to run their asses off.
Yeah, wouldn't you say that in terms of match fitness, being at the halfway point of a season where you've probably managed your workload, you've managed your minutes, you're not chasing something where you've been overworked. So if you're chasing a Champions League spot or a title or whatever, where you're not getting the rest that you need, seems a little bit better going into that window than MLS playing a full season like without a break, because you're not getting any break. I mean that's a pretty big workload to go into a World Cup. I mean it's a double-edged sword there, right? Where one of them's like peak form versus actual physical form of balance versus fatigue. But yeah, I mean, where do you see the advantage lying there?
I don't know. I guess it just seemed like usually a World Cup's at the end of other people's seasons, so the European season, right?
Right.
And so that was always something they had to deal with. They weren't getting any rest. And I guess now MLS players are going to get that rare opportunity to fall into that. And I wonder what they're going to do with it. Now, I don't know how many MLS players we'll be relying on at this point. I'm curious everybody's comments. Hit us up on Twitter if you want, Qué Golazo Pod, or hit us up now in the comments on YouTube. It's interesting. I don't know yet. I don't know if there's any benefit because I like what you're going and you've won me over with your narrative. I do want to say that the regular season for MLS is going to begin on February 26th. It's going to conclude on October 9th. The MLS Cup final is scheduled to occur on November 5th, 16 days prior to the 2022 World Cup. Which
okay,
gives
so 16 days before that. But if you go to MLS Cup, if you don't go to MLS Cup, you could be 2 to 3 weeks to 6 weeks out of season going into a World Cup for an MLS player, right?
Listen,
and
if you're on a team that doesn't qualify for the MLS playoffs, you shouldn't be on the World Cup roster. Can we put a new rule in right now? If you can't help your team, it's like 18 teams make the playoffs, dude. If your team is not good enough to be in the MLS playoffs, you don't deserve to go to a World Cup.
But even just thinking about it, you've got from this year that have been in contention, right? You've got right now Kevin Paredes. You've got not in contention yet, but he could spring out into that.
Sure.
You've got Jordan Morris coming back, not a deep run for Seattle this year. You've got Sebastian Lletget didn't make the playoffs. You've got who else within the? I mean, really, it's only Walker Zimmerman. Cade Cowell. And so there's a balance there. But if you put that into this upcoming season, you could have 2 or 3 players that are in your national team, guys that you are likely going to bring to your final camp. And maybe there isn't a final camp. Maybe it's not a 3, 4 day, 5 day final camp, but that could be having not played a game for 2 or 3 weeks at that point, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. You'd have to ask the sports scientists in terms of, the ebb and flow of all that, of trying to get them, Jimmy, periodization of a player after a season of
that's such a good coaching course.
It is. It is, dude. It is. It's all about getting, you got to build the trough and then you get them back up to their feet. We'll go through that another time. We'll break down periodization for training and matches. But it is an interesting time that teams are going to have to deal with. Now, club teams are like, man, my players are going to get no break. They're going to go to a World Cup. They're going to have all this travel. They're going to have to come right back again. They're going to play right into the season. And especially the ones now where they're going to AFCON is going to happen. And then you're going to go to the spring season. You're going to play through that into a World Cup. It's tough to say. I'm not sure what the breaks are for the European leagues this summer also in terms of, how much they're trying to jam in before or how long that break in the summer is. But yeah, it's certainly, I'm curious to dig more into who has the bigger benefit, the teams that play the winter schedule or players that play in a winter schedule league versus the players that play the summer schedule.
No, it's interesting. I think there's the possibility to play some closed door matches. I'm curious to see how creative the coaching staff gets. Cause I remember when we were at the World Cup in Germany, our first game was on the last match day.
Ooh,
so we had to wait
a week. Yeah.
It's and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And it sucks. And I remember Bruce set up a friendly against one of the African teams. I think it was Angola. And we played a closed door friendly behind closed doors, obviously, against them. And I think we won 1-0, but it was good for us to just kind of get those nerves out, get the anxiety out of being there and all the stress and all that, but also the excitement. You just want to kind of necessarily be chill when the whistle blows, but it's important to get those games, to your point, especially in a World Cup tournament. So if they could get some friendlies and just almost play every 5 or 6 days, like you're going to do in a World Cup, I think that would go a long way towards starting to get kind of that mindset and that periodization as you're talking about.
Yeah, that is a big point. That, it also depends on where your draw is in terms of your match day, because you could be, and players just want to play. And like you said, you want to get out some of that anxiousness, that nervousness, but you also want to have that rhythm of playing games.
Right,
you see what happens when you don't play games for a long time. We see that in MLS playoffs when the teams get a bye after an international break, and now they haven't played a game for 2 weeks. All that stuff adds up. Yes, on one hand, the upside, you go, hey, you get the rest, you get to whatever. On the other hand, you're like, we're an informed team right now. We want to keep playing games because we can beat anybody with the momentum that we have. And so there is always going to be that, or not always, but there can be that trade-off of like rest versus form and all of that when you're playing. And again, playing a tournament is a completely different thing. Jim, you've done it in a World Cup, but prepping for a tournament and how you play tournament play, the team that you roll out, how you manage the squad, how you're trying to get through a group versus, a league or a season is completely different.
It is 100%. And I think it's funny because I can already, for people listening, maybe more than the people commenting, because the people commenting we can see and we'll highlight your best comments. So keep those coming. But I could see the Euro snobs going, we're not going to rely on MLS players anyway. This pointless conversation, blah, 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 which is funny. So let's segue into European-based players. You like that segue? It was
I like
a nice
that.
little throw a little shade, little shade at our Euro snobs.
Hey, listen, if you do it this well, Jimmy, you don't have to humble brag. If you're going to be if your transition, you can start bragging about your transitions. You don't have to tell us what you did.
So we have 5 Americans that are left in the Champions League.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Brendan Aronson, RB Salzburg taking on Bayern Munich. Good luck with that, Brendan Aronson. Though I think it's a good opportunity for him. Kareem Adeyemi, Noah Okafor, that front three to get on a bigger platform and see what they can do against one of the best clubs in the world. Got Timothy Weah and Lille taking on Chelsea. Now, he hasn't been starting for them regularly, but I think he's going to get some valuable minutes. Hopefully, he can turn that into something special. You got Weston McKennie, Juve versus Villarreal. And also, I should go back to Chelsea because Christian Pulisic obviously plays for the Blues. So we actually have a matchup of Weah versus Pulisic. McKennie, I actually think that Villarreal, I think that could be the one upset if I think about it. Juve just, I don't know, man. They haven't figured it out under Maxi Allegri. They don't have the right parts. Different conversation, different podcast. We can get into that.
I will say also the Chelsea one, though, because Chelsea's the only English team that plays their first game at home. So there is something to say about Lille getting that second game away. True. That there's I know there's no away goals or any of that sort of stuff in the knockout rounds, but there is that momentum of saying, just like most teams do, is like, go and grind that out. Your second one's at home. Lille has that advantage against this Chelsea side. A Chelsea side, by the way, and again, we're talking about something in the middle of February that they're going to have to start playing these games. So a lot can change during that period.
Course.
But if you were playing Chelsea now in that context, you like your chances still with the way that Chelsea's giving up goals uncharacteristically differently than they did before. And I know we're trying to drive this back to USMNT, but if you're Timo Weah, you like this Chelsea side compared to the Chelsea side of past in terms of like not giving up any goals, staunch defense, and then have world-class players to bury you, including Christian Pulisic.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak, I guess, CONCACAF-wise, Jonathan David will be starting for Lille, most likely in those two legs against Chelsea. So we'll see how he performs, because right before those two matches, he's going to be taking on the U.S. on January 30th in Canada. So that should be
Hamilton, Ontario, January 30th. What is that weather going to be like?
It's going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal. And then there's Zach Steffen, obviously representing Manchester City behind with unfortunately sitting behind Ederson against Sporting Clube de Portugal. What I'll say about Sporting, I really like Sporting and how they've been playing. Pote in particular has been excellent throughout this, both domestically and in Europe. But Sporting really struggled with Ajax. Ajax were very Johan Cruyff inspired. So is Pep Guardiola. And I just feel like that type of style is going to run Sporting down. So Zach Steffen, maybe what I'm trying to say is if Man City can get a big lead in leg one, like Ajax did when they played in the first group stage game and then won 5-1 in Lisbon, then maybe Zach Steffen could get that second leg. That would be awesome. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, I did want to talk to you about Weston McKennie. There are rumors that Juve are looking to sell him and Aaron Ramsey and Archer. Now, there's been some links to Tottenham. Would you like to see Weston McKennie leave Juve and go to a different league, maybe even back to the Bundesliga for a bigger club, or go play for Antonio Conte with Spurs? Like, what are your thoughts on Weston McKennie's future, and do you think it's in Turin?
I don't think it's in Turin. I think he's done a good job there. The reason I don't like Turin for him or Juventus for him is because the club is in shambles right now, right? They're going through like an identity crisis in terms of how they play, the way that they approach games, the players that they have. Obviously, they left it late to let Ronaldo go, knowing that they needed to shed weight in terms of their wage bill, knowing that there's a lot of financials around that deal. Now, if they're going to come in January and build around that, great. And it's not even about whether the club is the right thing for him. Where I want to see Weston McKennie is rewarded for his performances. Find a place that if he is playing well and he is helping the team get results, that it's all about that. And Juventus, I think, is always going to be a place, because of the magnitude of the club, that you could find yourself in and out of the team every week forever, because you just don't know the pressure from the fans, the club. This is, 10 years in a row they won it. Now they haven't. Now they're struggling. Now they're just fighting to get top 4 is probably going to be their direction for the year. Then I don't think that's a great club for any player, not just Weston. If you're any player and you're looking at it and you're saying, you start to think like, well, there's nothing I can do to really control this. There's so many things happening around me that are outside of my control that I'm not sure if that's a situation that I would want to be in if I was Weston. So I think another club where, there's a little more stability to the club, I think is a better look for him. And even, dare I say, Spurs has more stability than a Juventus does, just because Juventus are so big that those swings are going to be even bigger than I think they are at a Spurs. What about you?
Well, Maxi Allegri came out and said that Locatelli is definitely one of their number one guy in midfield, and everybody's going to have to kind of work around there. They have Rabiot, who I think is actually better centrally, even though they try to put him out wide, and Benacer is another one, that they try to throw out there, or Bentancur.
Bentancur,
yeah, Bentancur. Yeah. Benacer's on AC Milan. With regard to Weston, though, they purchased him for $20 million. Do you think he's warranted. There's rumors that he'd go for 40. Do you think he's worth 40? Where do you think his value is? And because that would be good business from Juve. Whether he worked out or whether you thought he worked out or not, to buy him for 20 and sell him for 40 is good business in my humble opinion. I just don't know if he'd go for 40 unless there was some type of, I don't know, you're trying to sell this, hey, the American perspective, the sport's trying to grow in America. You get to market this player in a different way. I don't know. What do you think his value is? I know you're interested.
The thing is, he goes for 40. He goes for 40 to the Premier League because the Premier League will spend 40 on a player like Weston McKennie. I don't know if his valuation, if the market dictates that and it's a Premier League club, then yeah, he's worth 40 because that's what the Premier League top 6 or 8 are going to pay for a top level midfielder coming from another league or even domestically. They'll pay 25 for a guy. They'll pay a 25 for a guy coming out of an academy, you know? And so I think it's hard to value because it's all dictated by market conditions, but only somebody from the Premier League is going to pay 40 for Weston McKennie. And I think somebody like a Spurs can afford to pay that for a central midfielder. Now, what I like about Weston McKennie leaving is that, again, he becomes a piece of a larger puzzle, whereas that's what they bought him under. They bought him under the conditions of being a piece of a larger puzzle at Juventus, right? They didn't buy him to be a key piece of the larger puzzle. They bought him to be a piece of that puzzle. And then all of a sudden they were like, well, we need more goals from him. We need this, we need that. And they started trying to shape him into being another type of player with a different type of expectations. Now, I think Weston should want that with the ambition that he has. He's playing at Juventus, right? His goal count should go up if he's hovering in and around the box every game. But that's not necessarily what they brought him in as, right? He was more of an 8 instead of like an 8.5, where he's a little bit closer to the box more often and that sort of thing. So I think in another club or in another system, you can see the value that Weston brings. He can be your 4 to 7 goals a year kind of guy, late runner, but still has the pace to get back, transition game, good on the ball, those types of things. When you start to put him into some of these other clubs and systems, you go, okay, I can see the quality that Weston brings to this system.
Yeah, no, you make some good points. To see David's comment here and Larry's before that about Weston's Juve's best midfielder. Allegri said as much. Why would they let him go? Well, they got to figure out their books, and Heath can talk about it. Juventus has similar Barcelona vibes where they're on the precipice of being in a very, very dire financial situation. And maybe they're already there and they're just masking it a little bit better than Barcelona did. But with regard to Weston McKennie, I don't know. Maybe there's some emphasis about him wanting to go. He's played in 16 games so far under Allegri, and he could be a good partner for Locatelli for sure. I think there is room for him, and I think he has room to grow. Right now on transfer market, they're saying his value is 25 million. So maybe they wouldn't get 40 for him, but maybe 30, 35, still good business. But again, who are they going to? They've already mentioned that Artur's probably out. They're trying to move Ramsey as fast as possible. The guy's on $400K a week. Dude sits on the bench making $400K a week. Heath, what are we doing with our lives?
Dude, I'm on like $395 a week, you know.
Yeah,
and
but
you
with
know,
no decimal point or commas.
Yeah, and he doesn't even do podcasts. So.
He doesn't. All right, so that's the Weston McKennie talk. Obviously, plenty to get into as this goes along, and sure we'll talk about it much more on the U.S. Men's National Team Hour moving forward. But let's segue from one Champions League, the UEFA one, to Concacaf, because we have a lot of people that wanted to talk about NYCFC and their chances at winning the Concacaf Champions League, something an MLS team has never done. Do you think, Heath Pierce, that this NYCFC team will, one, take this competition serious, because sometimes some of the managers don't? Two, do you think they have the talent to outlast some of the Liga MX teams that are obviously very, very good? And shout out to Atlas, who won the Liga MX Apertura final, the first time they've won the league in 70 years. So all you Spurs fans out there, there is hope. It does turn around at some point.
It's a beautiful thing. It gets better, guys. It gets better. The way that I've always viewed CONCACAF Champions League specifically is who is going to match up best with the Liga MX teams, right? Now, there's a lot of luck that goes into it, and it depends on the draw and who you have to play. And we've seen teams have to play through Liga MX teams all the way to a final. Only to fall short on the MLS side. I think NYCFC is well built and well coached to match up, but we've seen that in the past, right? We've seen Atlanta match up. We've seen LAFC, especially peak LAFC match up with Liga MX teams. We've seen all of that in the past, the teams that match up well, but I've yet to see anybody. Actually, I thought LAFC were probably a team that could have taken that competition by storm, or should have, based on the way that they, again, match up, and the way that LAFC were pressing, the way that they were winning the ball in certain spots on the field against Liga MX teams, forcing bad turnovers. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's so tough to say how a team, because a lot of that is the draw for Concacaf Champions League. But NYCFC are certainly one of the better teams we've seen, but they weren't even favorites to win the league this year, or MLS Cup, let alone Concacaf Champions League, against teams that are well structured. I mean, Jimmy, what's your take? Obviously, you know, I know you know that the history of Concacaf Champions League quite well, but I feel like we've had a number of teams in the past that seem like, you know, including Toronto, where it seems like, oh, this is a team. Montreal's another one where you go, oh, this team has the capabilities to win it. But it's not about beating Liga MX teams along the way. It's literally about arriving and winning in a final.
It is. I think we've definitely fallen short a couple times in a final, not really making those, I don't know, those important plays, right? We talk about it a lot, not always on camera, but sometimes off of it, where I put a high premium after my coaching foray, or all my coaching experience. Like, you put a premium on players that recognize danger on the defensive side of the ball, and also on the attacking side of the ball, that recognition of this is a time where another team is vulnerable. How do you teach that? I don't know, right? That's still something I'm learning as a coach. How do you give them the confidence as players to go out there and make that happen? And I feel like this is where the Mexican League players have a little bit more than that. I think their tactical awareness, or just how to wear down teams, gets us. And unfortunately, when we play in the CONCACAF Champions League, now they have a 7-8 game head start. They're already kind of in their form. They know their team shape. They know how they want to press, and we're still somewhat in preseason mode. I'm tired of that excuse, and I don't want to use it anymore. And maybe with the league starting earlier this upcoming year, maybe NYCFC will be able to punch a little bit harder. And I know the Revs are in it too for being the Supporter Shield winner. I'd really like to see how the Revs are going to do.
Jimmy, on that note, the only argument is the same thing, right? Is that you're going this long period, you're going into preseason earlier. And I know. Finding matches of value is the hardest thing, especially right now in COVID, where teams aren't traveling freely for fun. Like we've seen a number of these little mini tournaments or preseason tournaments fall apart because of the fact that teams in the last minute are like, nah, this is a big lift for us. It's a financial lift to have testing, and all these times people just stay home. That you're going into a new year where, you know, you're potentially going months without any games of consequence other than, you know, the preseason types of ones where you play 30 minutes here, 40 minutes here. You need to get your guys up to 90 minutes fit to go into CONCACAF Champions League.
Yeah, no, you're right. And the 4 teams that are in are New York City FC, of course. And I think, to somebody's point, I think maybe it was Kai in the comments who said that if Tati Castellanos isn't available, or if he leaves in the January transfer window, it could be a big ask of this NYCFC team. And I agree with him. You have the New England Revolution, Supporter Shield winners. You have Colorado Rapids, who are the Western Conference regular season champs. I'm curious to see how they're going to do. And then apparently the Seattle Sounders are in as the highest ranked US-based Division I club, not already qualified. So the Sounders, you know, you can never sleep on those guys. They know how to win stuff, but they've been in this situation before and still haven't won the big enchilada. And I don't think we're going to start to get that respect as a league until we are in the FIFA Club World Cup, while we're actually playing Real Madrid or whoever it may be, or Chelsea in this particular instance as the Champions League winner, as in a real competition, not a glorified friendly when they're on their summer tours, you know. And I think that's going to have to start to change the perception. And I hope we can get there, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm always cautiously optimistic, and I'm always sadly disappointed by the end of it.
Well, again, if you went and looked at previous years, right? We saw Toronto FC lose in the final over, I think it was when they did 2 legs, and then LAFC lose in a single leg. LAFC, I still like their odds if they reach a final and they get to do it over 2 legs.
Sure.
COVID changed that into a single elimination, and we've seen that, you know, this last season where Monterrey play America one-off final. If you're a Monterrey fan or you're an America fan, you're like, kind of, that's a toss-up, right? And I saw the LAFC one as a toss-up. They end up falling short on that as well. But yeah, it depends on that draw. And then again, that time of the year is certainly an advantage to Liga MX teams. It's not an excuse, but it is an advantage on some level, especially in those early rounds when you haven't gotten to play those games. If you can survive those, then yeah, you got a chance.
So I just want to throw this out there, because there's a lot of talk that, not necessarily at the particular moment, but in general, that an MLS team has never won it. And that's not true. In 2000, the LA Galaxy won it. I remember being there. I was with San Jose Earthquakes, and I helped train at that time because I came home to LA for off season, and I was training, and Jurgen Klinsmann was out there. Like, we had everybody out there. Klinsmann was sharp, dude. He was playing really, really well, but they won 3-2 over Olympia from Honduras to win that CONCACAF Champions Cup, it was called then. Now it's changed to
well,
the
DC
CONCACAF
United
Champions
won
League.
2 years before that as well.
That's right. Sorry.
There's
Yeah.
been two Americans, and then we've fallen short a few times earlier rounds, but Real Salt Lake lost in a two-legged final.
That's all right. 2010.
Montreal Impact lost in 2014-15 in a two-legged final. Toronto lost in 2018, and then LAFC. Yeah.
So, but it's been 20 years since an American or an MLS-based team has won the CONCACAF Champions League. And so there's some work to do. We'll see. NYCFC are talented. I think they can contend breakout season for well, not only the player you mentioned, but also for a lot of players, I think, in NYCFC's case.
Well,
and again, it's another platform. Tallis is good.
Tallis is good. I mean, he's one that, again, it was a pivotal moment for Major League Soccer when Tallis came to Major League Soccer because he was highly touted as one of the next superstars of global football coming out of Brazil, and he came to MLS instead. And obviously scored in the playoffs, scored a big game, the game winner for them. I think it was against Philly, maybe. And it's a huge moment for him. But obviously, they're going to expect more from a young superstar player like him for next year. If you can get him, we're seeing this with Vinicius Jr. taking time to figure it all out at the level that he's at. But Tallis Magno was on the same trajectory as a Vinicius Jr. as the next sort of big star to come out of Brazil to go on to the next team. Was part of like the top 20 players in the world for his age group or whatever it was. And so they're going to need more out of him consistently. And especially if he can rise to the occasion in a CONCACAF Champions League, then yeah, it's exactly what you want. Because then the club has a value of this player. They don't bring a player like that in unless there's plans to sell them on to probably a City Football Group team in the future to see him come in first and then move on to a bigger club or get sold for a larger number to a club outside of their world. So they're expecting him to step up as well this upcoming season.
Do you know what I love about this podcast and this U.S. Men's National Team Hour in particular, Heath Pierce, is that we get to dive into some topics that we don't normally get to dive into, and we do it with a great community, so we appreciate all of you. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we're going to preview the big friendly this weekend for a lot of players that are going to be first-timers for the U.S. Men's National Team when they face Bosnia Herzegovina on December 18th on Saturday, so do not go anywhere. All right, everybody, welcome back. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Heath Pierce. And this is the Qué Golazo U.S. Men's National Team Hour. It's a weekly YouTube show. We do it live. We're for roughly 1 hour. Sometimes we go to 90 minutes, which makes a lot of sense since we're talking about the beautiful game. We obsess about the U.S. Men's National Team and all the ripple effects that extends to, whether it's MLS, whether it's Americans in the Champions League, whatever Americans are playing. We're going to talk about it and everything else surrounding it. And obviously they have a big game this particular weekend. And I don't know if there's going to be a January camp or not. We don't know if we've got any confirmation on that. We should figure that out, Heath Pierce. But they got a big friendly on Saturday against Bosnia Herzegovina. And there's going to be 11 first-timers who have never actually been in a camp before out of the 26 that got called in. Now, before we get into this conversation, into the preview, we wanted to say we want to welcome everyone to the show. If you're watching live, do your part to spread this video far and wide by simply hitting like and subscribe, leaving a comment, letting us know where you're from and who you support. Always a good way to get introduced into the community. And then to be a part of this conversation, there's always a live chat. And we want to see you in there with your observations, questions, grievances, or whatever else you need to get off your chest. Okay? But let's keep things civil. That's all we ask. You know, we still want to show that there's a world out there where people can be respectful, even if they disagree on certain opinions. So, Heath Pierce, this will be the last of 22 games that the U.S. Men's National Team has played in 2021. That's a lot of goddamn games.
Yeah. Ooh, man, I would love those bonuses. Oh, that's a pretty good run of games.
That's true.
If you're somebody that's gotten to play most of them. Kellen Acosta.
Now, only 4 of them have been against non-CONCACAF opposition. Northern Ireland, Switzerland, and Qatar, who they played in the Gold Cup. Now, what are your thoughts on the standard of the opposition, and which national teams would you like the U.S. Men's National Team to measure up against in 2022 ahead of the World Cup to help us get fine-tuned for that big competition, assuming we qualify? I have to add that disclaimer because we didn't do it in 2018. I'm still bitter about it.
Well, I think there's a few things there, right? I think it's actually come to help us only being able to get CONCACAF teams to play against us, right? We are still in the world of COVID and travel and things like that. And granted, we've also had over this last year 2 competitions that we had to play in. Granted, one of them was a semifinal and final, but you had the Gold Cup as well, and where you played against Qatar, who was a very different style of play, and one that you're going to play against when you see the likes of, not to put Qatar and Spain in the same category, but the Xavi connection. You can see that the style of play that they had was very different, possession minded, where I think the U.S. actually was kind of punched in the face a little bit about these teams that like, oh wow, they can break pressure with passing. They see the game differently. There's a cool and collective nature to them. I think the U.S. needs to play some more of those. Now, I think it also is an advantage, as I mentioned, that they've played against these CONCACAF teams because it's only further helped, right? You play Honduras in a semifinal. Great. That helps us play Honduras in the future. You play Mexico in 2 finals. That helps us in the future. You're playing against Costa Rica. You're playing against all these teams that only better prepare you under different circumstances and different levels of pressure for the teams you're having to play against to qualify for a World Cup. So I think that helps. Now, does it help test us and see where we're at against other teams? We've got Northern Ireland. We've got who else was there in that?
Well, Switzerland. Well, let me say this: FIFA rankings, we're currently ranked 12th.
Yep.
Switzerland are 13th. Mexico's 14th. Listen, I was part of the team ahead of the World Cup in 2006. It was the 3rd ranked country in the world. I know these things are a bit inflated. Let's just take it for what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm just glad the U.S. is above Mexico. Let's just end it there. Switzerland 13th. Now, when I look for Northern Ireland, I don't see them for a while. They're not on the first page, not in the top 50.
They're playing in Conifa.
They're the 54th ranked team, and Qatar is 51st.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I would love them to play against more diverse teams. Now, whether they're in the top 10 or 20, I don't necessarily think that's going to be the indicator. Anybody top 40, I think, is going to be a different type of team. I think the U.S. should make sure that they have an African team. And when I say African, that's all encompassing, which isn't the right thing to do because your North African style of play are going to be much more technical. Yes. The game in South or West or whatever, there's different styles of play in every country of course. In Africa. But I'd like to see somebody from that region based on the fact that you might get one in a World Cup. I think you can prepare for, I think the way that some of the North African teams will play similar to some of the South American teams. It's a little more tiki-taki. It's a lot more kind of beautiful football-esque. And so a more diverse skill sets that are going to prepare you for teams that are going to play you differently in a World Cup. Because again, qualifying over, 14 games? 14 games is very different than tournament play. Tournament play is completely different. How you get points on your first game might be different if you're faced up against Brazil. And then how you then manage the rest of your group and how that changes the dynamic of whether we're defensive or attacking or where we're vulnerable or where we take our chances. I think you need to play against other types of opponents that are also going to be playing you like a chessboard. And so while, again, I think playing CONCACAF teams helps, and it helps to qualify for a World Cup, it doesn't get us any closer to seeing how we match up with other teams. And I actually think our national team is very well equipped to play against other styles of play, especially European nations, when we have our best team on the field. Jimmy, I don't know what your thoughts are on that as well.
Well, no, so Derp's getting in there saying this is a Bosnia team that will also be kind of their C team, right? Because they have a lot of players, their top players playing in Europe or whatever it may be.
Yep.
Don't want to travel over to the U.S. I get all that. We're also not bringing an A team. We have probably a C team as well. So this will be a good competition for both sides as both coaching staffs evaluate that next layer of depth that could potentially push on or to validate why they should be considered for more minutes moving forward. With regard to who we want to play in 2022, listen, Ivory Coast got shocked in the Africa. I mean, it was between them or Cameroon. That's a really tough group anyway, but Cameroon ends up doing the business. I'd get Ivory Coast on the schedule as soon as humanly possible. Like, that would be a great team to play, especially if they brought all their 8. I'm talking like in the summer when the European leagues are done and we get those friendlies in. Go get Ivory Coast on the schedule. And then once all those other European teams fall out that don't qualify for the World Cup, get those bastards on the schedule as well. Or maybe if you can get some other World Cup qualifiers or participants, you get them on the schedule. But I actually would like to see, and I know, as you say, there's always a different style, sometimes within the same country, right, of how you should play. And obviously the Catalans see the game different than the Madridistas, you know? So I get all that. But it would be cool to get like a representative. Let's play somebody from South America, get somebody from Africa, get somebody from Europe. You know, if we can get a Japan on the schedule, that would be awesome. You know, so I hope we get a whole bunch of different styles. And I'd be really surprised if Gregg and the staff weren't thinking in that capacity. But Ivory Coast would be a tremendous game, I think, for us because they do have some styles. You know, I think Cameroon, Nigeria, some of these teams play similarly to them. Not like for like, of course, but you know, will give us some trouble and things to think about, assuming when the draw comes out. Now, obviously, this is still the disclaimer that we're going to qualify. We're obviously, you know, hopeful, and we're only a few games. If we win 3 or 4 more games, we should be set. We only 6 left though, so if we win 3, I think we're all right. Yeah, but different conversation for now. I don't want to worry about it till we get closer to the next qualifying window. But yeah, it's interesting times, and I'm curious to see how this is all going to play out. But with regard to Bosnia, now let's get back onto this game in particular. Who do you want to see here? What are your expectations of this game? And I wish that we had more than one. We talked about it on the last U.S. Men's National Team Hour because we're bringing in so many players. To give, let's say, a Johnny Cordoso only 30 minutes feels a little unfair that we're going to evaluate a guy for only 30 minutes and be like, nah, you're not good enough, you know?
Yeah, this is the issue that I'm running into, right, Jimmy, which is Gregg Berhalter has set out this year to get more experience to more players. We've seen him do that over 2021, right? You played in the Gold Cup with a different team than you played in the Nations League semifinal and final. You've rolled out 34 players in qualifying so far this year. You've seen a diverse group of players that when you come into these games, it's hard for me to think about a player who hasn't been seen yet. So for me, I'm like, let's see the players that we haven't seen. Because maybe, to go back to my Conrad comment, maybe there's a player that you're like, wow, you know, isn't in the right circumstances or needs to move to a new club, or this player has something that I haven't seen before. And so when I'm thinking about building out that roster, yes, I know Matt Turner's in the team. Yes, I know Matt Turner doesn't have a lot of caps, but am I using a cap on him? Or am I using a cap on Gabriel Slonina, who I want to bring in, who's 17 years old, dual national, that I want to see? Can he, like, what is it like in playing in a game? And again, a national team is a national team game. Yes, these games tend to be a little bit different, right? The January camp games at times were a little bit different. You played against other B teams or other alternative teams for players that were just domestic in those teams. And some countries had mostly domestic players. Some countries had mostly foreign players in terms of where they're applying their trade and whether they're available in a January camp. So when I think about that, I think about, again, going from Gabriel Slonina to the back line of players that haven't had a chance to play or show themselves. You know, you've got Henry, you've got Henry Kessler, you've got Kobe Henry, you've got Jonathan Gomez, you've got a number of players that are in this. Kevin Paredes is another one. Brian Reynolds, who hasn't gotten time. You have a chance to see a lot of these guys, or you could just play Kellen Acosta in the midfield, or you can look at Jackson Ewell, who I don't think is an unknown target. But Cole Basket is one that hasn't been in. That I'm
sure, like, okay, but do you feel like it makes sense to have 11 players we've never seen before? Or do you feel like there should be a blend of players that know what it means to line up with the team, that can hold these younger players accountable, to make sure they're moving in the right way, to make sure that I'm kind of curious as to the formation too, because we might be better set up in this particular, with the 26 players out there, in a double pivot as opposed to the single, assuming, so do you want to stick kind of with what we want to move forward with as a group, or are you trying to play to the players that you have in front of you? I think that's one challenge. Yeah. The second one is, do you put some experience in the spine of your team? I'd like to see Slonina in goal as well. But if you do that, then I'd really like to have a Walker Zimmerman out there to kind of control things. But I also agree with you. I don't want to take minutes away from some of the other guys. Now, I could see this being a bit of a split squad. We could see 11 players do the first half and another 11 players do the second half, which feels kind of crappy because it's harder to establish a rhythm sometimes. Yeah. But that might be the best way for Gregg to solve a little bit of these problems, because I want to see a Justin Che. I want to see guys that maybe haven't necessarily lit up MLS or their particular clubs, but as you and I both know, sometimes players play different for the national team and do rise to the occasion. I think you and I are probably good examples of that. So who's this, how do you know until you know? And you got to give them some minutes to see.
Well, there's 12 players in this group that have 0 caps in the national team. And so I do agree. It's hard because, on one hand, if you're Matt Turner, you're like, dude, I want another start. Like, why am I not getting the start? And so I could see there being a half and a half. But, in terms of judgment, I'm looking at that saying, well, you need a Walker Zimmerman, because with Walker Zimmerman, you have a calming presence, which is actually going to allow the players you want to test on the field to play better, to relax, to know that they have some confidence around them, some experience around them. Somebody's going to do their job of making it easier. Jimmy, when I became a center back, I took what I liked from my center backs as a left fullback that allowed me to cheat at times and allowed me to get in good spots and sort of see the game and make their job easier, right? I try to apply those things. Now, if you have a Walker Zimmerman, he can do that, having the experience that he has. So I do think up your spine, you want to have some of those players. Now, where you get into the midfield, that's where it gets a little bit trickier because Kellen Acosta or Christian Roldan, sure, you could play with both of them, but there's also an argument for Johnny Cordoso or Cole Bassett. And I don't want to see those guys get bit part minutes. Now, having said that, Gregg Berhalter is getting a pretty good sample size over a couple weeks, and training is just training. Some guys are pure gamers. We've seen that, guys that are not great in training. But very rarely in the national team do you have guys that go, oh, he's bad constantly, right? Like there's a certain level when you get to it that it's usually the game is fast enough where you don't have guys that are just having shockers or don't show up or, when you turn over. There is just a constant like just the demand mentally of a training session for the national team, regardless of it's your A, B, or C team, is so much higher than at a club team that guys usually get found out and have to step up. You don't get to have days off. So,
right.
But I do think Gregg's going to have an idea of like, okay, I've seen video of these. My scouts have seen videos. I brought these guys in. I'm seeing what I want to see. Now, these 2-3 players, I like what I see. Other ones, I'm like, okay, it's what I thought it was going to be. I mean, do you feel differently on that?
No, I don't feel different. I think that he's going to split the squad. The more that we talk about it, the more that I think it through. I think he's going to have 1-11 start the first half and another 11 start the second, or at least a big sea change, a line change, as you call it in hockey. And you're going to, and that's going to be that.
So hard to get a rhythm after that.
I understand that.
All the friendlies that Gregg Berhalter has done, when he rotates all those players, you're like, oh, I guess I'll go do something else now because the rhythm of this game is gone. And obviously he's trying to get as much experience and also exposure for these guys. But
I don't know. I don't know. Well, before we get into what I think our starting lineup should be, and of course yours, Heath, as well, I have to let everybody know that the biggest events of the NWSL offseason are happening this week with the NWSL expansion draft and the NWSL college draft. The expansion draft welcomes 2 brand new clubs to the league, and coverage kicks off on Thursday, December 16th at 7 p.m. with the full 2-hour event airing on CBS Sports HQ, the CBS Sports Network, Twitch, YouTube, and Paramount Plus. The NWSL College Draft is just 2 days later on Saturday, December 18th, starting at 2 p.m. with live coverage on CBS Sports HQ. And make sure, and you have to do this for us, you got to promise and pinky swear, make sure you listen to Attacking Third with Sandra Herrera and our very own producer, Lisa Roman, for full NWSL draft previews with guest experts and live draft recaps following the coverage on CBS Sports HQ. Find Attacking Third on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or watch on youtube.com/Attacking Third. Do it. It is awesome. It is well worth your time, and it would give some much needed love and respect and admiration to the women's game in this country.
Hey, I've got 2 of those teams coming to Southern California, Jimmy. Who do you have in the Bay Area? Actually, I did hear rumors that
I'm an LA native, dude.
And I'm
NWSL just team. Because you live in LA now, you can't claim it, dude. You're from Modesto.
Well, you can't claim San Jose then. You can't claim San Jose to being a legend. If you must be a legend in one place only, Jimmy. You know, in
Kansas City's where I'm a legend, buddy.
Okay,
on the playing field. But I'll say that I was born and raised in LA. I can claim Angel City, okay. Or the San Diego Wave. But I'm gonna go with Angel City. That's my squad. Kristen Press.
All right, then I'll hold off on my fandom then until the Bay Area gets an NWSL team, because I did hear we're about a year or 2 out from that.
It's gonna happen.
Central Valley. We heard the Central Valley, which ended up being San Diego when they took the MLS team from there and went to San Diego to put an NWSL team. That's
a
conversation for another day.
It's just a matter of time. Well,
I guess I'll hold off on my loyalty.
Well, we can pass the baton to that conversation over to Sandra and Lisa, who can handle it. Over the
I would love for Sandra or Lisa to tell me who I should be supporting, or if I should hold off. Should I go with the LA team because I live here now, or should I hold off on their
you're going
Northern
California. I'm going to see you and your girls at the game wearing all the merch. I already know what's happening. Don't even try to pretend you're going to follow any other team. All right, getting back to the U.S. men's national team against Bosnia Herzegovina this weekend, December 18th on Saturday. What do you think Gregg Berhalter is looking for from this game, knowing the challenges that we've already discussed of having so many players and trying to see them in valuable moments?
God, it's so hard, Jimmy. I mean, 22 games this year. There's not, when I think about like, what does Gregg Berhalter gain from giving Kellen Acosta another game? And I don't say giving, because that's the wrong way, of Kellen Acosta earning another game. What do we gain as fans? What does Gregg gain in terms of that, other than potential stability, more experience on the field? But I think you can get that from maybe you have Christian Roldan or Kellen Acosta be one of your 2 midfielders. Then you have Walker Zimmerman in your back line. And then the rest is up for grabs. I don't think, maybe you want to keep George Bello fresh. Maybe there's a conversation of saying, hey, we've got the scouts wanting one last look at an international level for George Bello before he gets sold abroad. They want to have one more little taste of that. Maybe there's a little of a conversation there happening. Not to say that that's what the national team's coach's job is to do, but if there's a better opportunity out there, you kind of want to assist those players in their journey. And if you can do that, but Justin Che is one that I thought had some good games this year. Jonathan Gomez, gosh, it's so hard to build this back line. Do you want to start off, Jimmy? Because I'm playing Gabriel Slanina, and I'm too deep in this where I want to see all these new players to be like, we've been so addicted to new players over the last 2 years and we've seen them work out and pan out and shape literally our national team of players in the last 18 months. We've seen more players come in than ever before in terms of like not just getting a look, but actually establishing themselves and pushing out the old generation, which I hate, but I love to see at the same time. I don't know where to start because I always want to see I'm addicted to the next player coming in and arriving and forcing or challenging for a spot in the national team.
Okay, so I just want to state that When's the last time Ricardo Pepe? The last time Ricardo Pepe scored in MLS was September 13th. That is exactly 3 months ago. And he's had 1 goal in those 3 months. And that was against Sporting Kansas City in a 3-1 loss. I want to see him start because I want him to get his mojo back. I want him to start hitting the back of the net. And I think that could potentially happen against a Bosnia team that isn't their A squad. I want to see Jordan Morris get back out there because I want to see how he's going to fit in and can he make the most of his most likely 45 minutes and really have an impact on the game.
I see what you did, Jimmy. Starting at the top line.
I am.
That. It's easier than the back line.
I want to see Cade Cowell. There's some part of me that likes Cade Cowell in the 9 spot, but it seems like he's destined to play the wing currently.
Jordan Morris, he's a power player.
He is a power player. He does. He's a big guy like Jordan as well. So Cade Cowell on one side, Morris on the other, Ricardo Pepe up top. I want to see potentially like maybe a double 10 in some ways, even though I know that Gregg likes to play inverted wingers. But when you have Morris and Cade Cowell, I feel like they got to be more traditional. Maybe they'll go inside out. We'll see. But some kind of variation of, I'd love to see Caden Clark get a run out. I know that he had that appendectomy early in the season or during the season, and that really kind of slowed him down after building on a great 2020, which got so much interest. RB Leipzig paid for him. I think there was some pressure there. He couldn't get back into the team for the Red Bulls. And I want to see him maybe get some minutes here. I don't know if he'll start. Maybe Cole Bassett will get the start. Jesus Ferreira could be another one. And then as much as I'd like to see somebody other than Acosta, and I know what Jackson Ewell can bring to the table, I'd like to see Johnny Cordoso. Like if we're going to really bring him in, I want to see him play. Whether he starts or not, I don't know. But I want to see at least 45 minutes from him. Out wide, I don't need to see George Bello. I know what he can bring to the table. I'd like to either see Jonathan Gomez if he's available. There is rumors that he might be leaving to go join Real Sociedad. So I don't know if he's available. That's the latest news I know. Maybe you know something different. I wouldn't mind seeing Kevin Paredes. I think he's got a bright upside, and I'm looking forward to seeing him. I think it'll be Aaron Long, depending on his fitness, and Walker Zimmerman. Gregg is very high on Aaron Long. But it would be cool to see Kobe Henry or Henry Kessler. I think we'll see those guys. Aaron Trusty. Brian Reynolds, I think, is the guy you have to give a shot at right back. And then I would go with Slanina in goal, to be honest. Maybe Matt Turner starts and Slanina gets the second half. Justin Shea in the second half. I don't know. What do you guys think that are listening? Hit us up at Qué Golazo Pod on the Twitter or right now in the comments on YouTube.
Yeah, the thing about I've always seen Kevin Paredes as a winger also. He's pretty nasty on the ball. Now, maybe there is a thought or a little bit of a subtle move that they placed him as a defender on this team or on this roster. I don't know. Maybe it's a typo, but it just seems like there was something strategic.
Yeah, he should have been in the middle. Like there's like no midfielders, and Paredes should be in the midfield crew for sure.
And so I'm wondering how that was. But he was when I've seen him on the ball, he actually had there was a lot of people arguing that Kevin Paredes should have been the young player of the year because of his stats versus Ricardo Pepe, not for U.S. Soccer, but for Major League Soccer as the young player of the year, just because of the stats that he put up as an 18-year-old as well. I mean, look at this team that we're putting out, though. You got Caden Clark. You've got, if we put it out, Ricardo Pepe. You've got Cade Cowell, and you've got Kevin Paredes, all young star attacking players. Now, for me, I'm not going to talk about them because people have heard of them. I want to see these types of young players step up as defenders. Jimmy, I've yet to see a young player become a young, I don't know, like the maturity you see the confidence of an attacking player seems different when you're 18 than a defensive player that owns a back line or is defensively sound, but amazing on the ball. Could Kevin Paredes be that guy if he embraced defending? Maybe, but I would love to see that type of development, but I've yet to see that for the U.S. in a while. Obviously, Serginho Dest being a good example, but when was the last time you saw a defender come through and you go, okay, Robinson maybe, I mean, but at the teenage year, step into the national team and just be like, oh, that guy deserves to be here. I mean, Matt Miazga was one that came through when he was just at the Red Bulls before he went to the Chelsea loan system. Like, I don't know, that's what I want to see is like that development of those players too. And I know, we've got a crazy amount of good attackers. But
so maybe Paredes comes in for Jordan Morris in the second half. You have Jonathan Gomez playing the left back spot. I bet Acosta starts. I could see Matt Turner, Long, Zimmerman, that kind of spine of the team, especially in that area of the field, starting. And that way everything else is organized. Yeah. And then everybody else is super young. Obviously, Ricardo Pepe would be an experienced player. Jordan Morris, experienced player as well. And then Jesus Ferreira obviously had a couple meaningful appearances for us there at the very end, getting called into some important camps. So in that spine of the team, you've got some experience, and then you start to put out your young players or people coming back from injury everywhere else, and then you rotate those. It'd be interesting to see. I think it's going to be a good experiment. So let me say it like this, Heath, and I know we're going to tie up here the U.S. Men's National Team Hour. We're into extra time right now for this. We're in injury time. But who are the 3 players, and everybody else listening and watching, who are the 3 players that you really want to see? Or maybe it's an important, very important game for them that could be somewhat make or break. And I'm kind of looking at Jordan Morris and or Aaron Long, who are coming back from significant injuries, getting into the team. It could be one of the younger players they're all excited about, Jonathan Gomez, Paredes, Cordoso we haven't really seen much of, Caden Clark. I mean, who are the players that you really think they can take advantage of this? Or I don't know. You can characterize these 3 any way you want, but what are you thinking?
Yeah. So I'm going to put it, I'm not going to go with the experienced players like an Aaron Long or Jordan Morris because of the fact that I think that if they are good enough at their team, they've got enough experience to just be called in, right? To a training camp. I think they have the shortest path to getting into the first team. What I want to see, if I were to take 3 players, Cade Cowell is one, just because I want to see, can he, I mean, if he that guy is a monster, and
he's a monster.
And he has the potential to be.
He's a grown ass man, dude. When I see him, like, you are a grown ass man.
Oh, he's from Modesto. He's from Ceres, literally the town over. This is country bred kid right here, dude. This is the kid that we talked about. If you grew up in my hometown, which is where he's from, this kid would have been on everybody's watch list for NFL, not NFL, but college scholarships for football, for basketball. Everybody of the main schools would have been going after him because of the type of athlete that he is. But here he is now signing a contract when he's a teenager and actually fulfilling that in terms of his potential. So he's one that I want to see, not just because of where he's from. And Kevin Paredes is another one that I want to see in terms of having a performance of somebody that I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's a gamer and this guy's fearless and he can go after you and he'll beat you in every which way when he's on the ball. And then I'm kind of torn between my third one being Caden Clark and Slonina. So Slonina is the one that's it's Caden Clark, Jesus Ferreira, and Slonina, where I'm just like, one of them I'd like to see Jesus Ferreira take the fact that he's been called into the first team now, bring it back here and be like, yo, this is my spot. And none of you punk kids without the experience that I have been there before. And I'm going to own this with the confidence that I think he can, or what we saw at least last season, less so this season in Major League Soccer. So that's the one for me. And then obviously, I'm not going to pick
fourth
more,
here.
No, not a fourth, but I want to find a sleeper. Give me a sleeper of somebody, whether it's Kobe Henry, Jonathan Gomez, somebody like that, Henry Kessler, somebody that's like, oh yeah, like somebody that's in their hotel room right now, meditating, like manifesting that they've waited their whole life for this moment, and we're going to see some sort of springboard that we've never seen before. Rarely happens, but that would make me happy. What about you? What are your 3?
No, I've seen Cade Cal play plenty with the San Jose Earthquakes because I'm in the Bay Area now, so I have a good idea what he's about. Obviously, I'd like to see him get minutes and see how he performs for the U.S. It's different when you wear the U.S. jersey. I'd like to see a little bit of Cole Bassett, frankly, and Caden Clark. I know what Pepe and Morris can do. I want to Paredes. I know I'm naming a bunch here.
You get 3, Jimmy. You just named
like
11.
I'll name 3. Caden Clark.
Okay.
I have an interest in Taylor Booth.
But for Caden Clark, is it literally because you want to see him play at the international level? Because he was really good with the 20s, or is it like I want to see if Caden Clark can get to the first team now?
It's to your point. He has, for me, that ambition to want to keep pushing. Like, he pushes the game. Yeah. So I want to see him do that for the U.S. Does that change? We see it with Brendan Aronson.
He's got some Aronson in him. Yeah.
He's got some Aronson in him where he gets it and he tries to push.
Except he can finish. He can finish too. That's the thing about Caden Clark. He can finish. He can finish balls. Like, he can hit the ball.
So where's he going to set up? And if we start him or if we play him, where does he actually play? And can he make a difference? I think that he will, but I want to see how he does. Right? It's one thing to say he can do it, another thing for him to actually do it himself.
Yeah.
So I just want to see Caden Clark. Taylor Booth, for me, playing for Bayern Munich's second team or Bayern Munich 2. I'm curious about him because he's got some right back, wing back possibilities. He can play right wing, kind of Paredes like, right?
Yeah, he's just not first team. Like, he's not.
I know, but I just
like got it.
I almost want to. I wish Joe Scally was here so we could actually see Joe Scally.
I know. He's still playing. Jeez, man.
I don't know. Mönchengladbach's getting slapped around right now, so I don't know how that's looking for him.
Yeah.
And outside of that, then I think there's something about Jonathan Gomez I'd like to see. There's so much hype around him, and it seems like he's a unanimous choice for most people that have been watching and putting.
I'm always down to
comments
see
in.
more left backs anyway, even though
For
like
sure.
I suffered with being called crap my whole life, and like the left back position is always the one everybody wants to fix. Fullback positions are, they seem dime a dozen, and everybody's always looking for a better one. So I get it. So I've jumped on that train and said, like, let's bring in more left backs.
I wanted to be the host so I could ask you the hard questions. Now I want to name more than 3 people as well. Okay, last one, everybody. Last one, and then we're going to go. Of this group of players, of this 26, and I gave you that prediction god status right here, Heath Pierce. Which one of these 26 do you think has the best chance of making the final 23-man roster for Qatar?
Matt Turner.
Assuming we qualify, I have to say that. You can't. No, get Matt Turner out of there.
Okay.
Or Ricardo Pepe. Like, let's take Pepe and Turner and
Zimmerman out too.
Zimmerman out. And Acosta.
and Acosta. Jeez Louise.
Okay, wait. Acosta's got to be out. So Pepe, Acosta, Zimmerman, and Turner are out. Okay, outside of those 4.
Best chance. Okay, I mean, if Jordan Morris is fit, I think he pushes for it. But I'm going to go with just more of a moonshot, if you don't mind. And I'm going to say, man.
Don't give me that Slonina as the number 3.
No. I want that so bad too.
It's such an easy fallback.
Yeah, I would say of anybody here, I'm going to say the best chance is going to go to, man, because Cole Bassett or Jackson Ewell could get in with an injury, but
now you're trying to predict injuries.
I'm hedging.
Let us know in the chat, everybody, and then of course hit us up on Twitter at Qué Golazo Pod.
All right. I'm gonna go with man. Jordan Morris is the easy bet, but I'm gonna go with Caden Clark or Cade Cowell. Which one I'm gonna go with?
Caden Clark for sure over Cade Cowell, in my humble opinion.
Okay, Caden Clark, that's the one.
Because Caden Clark's going. Well, he's going. I would probably go with Caden Clark.
Yeah, but
he's going to RB Leipzig.
You're hedging that he's going to play at RB Leipzig, though.
Like, no, that's true. That's true. I am hedging that a little bit, and it might not happen because they've got a new coaching staff in place, right?
Yeah.
With
he's got the best pathway if all goes well to insert himself into this team.
He does, yeah. And also because there's some injury concerns for that area of the field, Gio Reyna has been getting some knocks. Christian Pulisic can't stay healthy. That could be a possibility there. That gets him in there. I like the Caden Clark shout, especially compared to Cade Cowell. Man, we're kind of thin on the left back spot. He does seem to trust George Bello a little bit, even though he's a known quantity. I'll say Aaron Long. I think Aaron Long's going to go in there. One.
Where is he at? How far is he able to
I don't
play
know, but I know Gregg loves him, so I think he's going to bring Aaron Long no matter what.
I mean, Gregg, if Aaron Long goes, Walker Zimmerman's not going to the World Cup. You don't have room for both of them, can you? And then who else is out?
Well, then you have Miles, and you have, because John Anthony Brooks isn't going to the World Cup, dude.
Yeah.
Not my opinion. That. He's not even starting for Wolfsburg anymore, and that's probably a good thing because they're getting slapped around.
No, he started last week. He's just out for one game or what?
Well, he didn't play last week, and they lost 3-1.
Yeah,
they're struggling.
Relax. Rotation.
I'm just
squad
saying.
rotation.
I'm just saying.
No, man. Okay, yeah, that's a solid.
And then you have Chris Richards. He just scored for Hoffenheim. He's full of confidence. You could have Richards, Miles Robinson, Zimmerman, and Long. Okay, I'm just saying. I know that Gregg loves Aaron Long. He's going to find a place for him.
Okay, so
there might be more than one from this list. I'm just from outside of the 4 that we've already named.
What about Austin Trusty, by the way? We haven't mentioned him.
Yeah, I don't know. I like him.
Yeah.
He might just have too much work to do to climb over some of the guys that are already established.
That's fair.
Now everybody wants to talk about John Anthony Brooks, and he should be there. We're going to have to save that for the next U.S. Men's National Team Hour. We're calling it a show, everybody.
It's every week.
On behalf of Des Norris and Lisa Roman, our producers, and Heath Pierce, I'm Jimmy Conrad. We thank you so much for watching the show live with us on YouTube. If you want to listen to it on podcast form, follow Qué Golazo Podcast. That is on all of the relative outlets that you like to hear your podcasts. That is Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. You guys know the business at this point. You're well-versed in how things work in the digital space. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next week for the U.S. Men's National Team Hour. Later.